Good morning, all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So, in this video, we'll be taking up three newspapers for the analysis for 16th of February 2023. So, we see that Cabinet clears 7 ITBP battalions, so Indo-Tibetan Border Police battalions, to be deployed along the Indo-China border, and over 9,000 personnel will be recruited for the deployment in the Arunachal Pradesh. And around rupees 4,800 crores has been sanctioned under the Vibrant Villages program to stop the migration and boost tourism in the border villages. So here it is important for us to know that which all forces are deployed along the borders with different countries. So along the Indo-China border, we have ITBP, and you can find out more about with the which all different forces are there along the different borders. So that is there. And apart from that, we have today there will be elections going on in the Tripura state. So today is the voting day over there. So High Court questions the use of POXO Act in the Assam crackdown. So we know that regarding the child marriages, the state of Assam, it is taking some strict actions under this POXO Act, and people who are found like who are indulging into child marriages, they are being booked under this POXO Act. So High Court has raised questions over the use of this act for booking people under the child marriage. So the Guwahati High Court has questioned the application of Protection of Children from the Sexual Offences Act in the child marriages in Assam, while granting anticipatory bail to the 9 people booked under the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act on 14th of February. So we'll be looking more into that. So we see that our merchandise exports are falling, and they fell for the second month in a row in January. And so basically our merchandise exports are falling. So here it is important for us to know the trend which are going on in different areas. Like here we're talking about the merchandise sector. So you should be knowing about whether in the service sector case, do we have a deficit or we have a surplus? And then you can talk about the BOT trade balance. So here we just had all the political news. So coming to the editorial page. So talking about the antimicrobial resistance. So here a manifesto for tackling the silent pandemic of antimicrobial resistance. Here, the world is emerging from the acute phase of COVID-19 pandemic, the very harmful but invisible pandemic of the antimicrobial resistance is unfortunately here to stay. So most countries, they understood in 2020 the clear and the present danger of COVID-19, and we see rapidly rising cases of antimicrobial resistance. Rates also need an accelerated multi-sectoral, global, and national response to this issue. So, as the current G20 president, which is India, and as a vulnerable country also, India has a key role in ensuring that it remains high on the global health agenda. Basically, antimicrobial resistance. So, microbial resistance to antibiotics has made it harder to treat the infections in cases such as pneumonia and tuberculosis, blood poisoning, and then several foodborne diseases, because there basically our bodies develop resistance towards the antibiotics, and the medicines, they are ineffective in such cases where a patient develops a resistance towards the antibiotics. So it poses a huge health cost on the patient in form of longer hospitalization, health complications, and delayed recovery. And in 2019, AMR was associated with an estimated 5 million human deaths. So that is, we can say, a life-threatening disease, and it adds to the burden of the communicable diseases and strains the health systems of the country. So the Indian Council of Medical Research, its study in 2022 showed that the resistance level increases from 5% to 10% every year for broad spectrum antimicrobials. So it is like increasing every single year. So since India is like the current president of G20, so this must be on the top of the health agenda. Apart from that, so high levels of resistance, WHO has increasingly expressed concern about the dangerously high levels of antibiotic resistance among the patients across the countries. And here, if we take an example of ciprofloxacin, an antibiotic commonly used to treat the urinary tract infections. So, according to WHO, resistance to it varied from about 8.4% to 92%. And apart from that, so there is also an urgent need to reduce the usage of antimicrobials in the agricultural food system. And scientific evidence suggests that the less antimicrobials are used, it is less likely that there will be an emergence of drug resistance also. So countries such as Netherlands and Thailand, they have decreased their usage by almost 50%. And in China also, the consumption of antibiotics in the agricultural sector has fallen substantially. So the use of antibiotics in healthy animals to boost growth has also been reduced in the last decade in many countries. So all these things must be paid attention to. And from policy to the ground level, so the National Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance, which was formulated for a period between 2017 to 2021, it emphasized the effectiveness of the government's initiatives for hand hygiene and sanitation programs such as Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, then Kayakalp and Swasth Sarvatra. So the government has also attempted to increase the community awareness about the healthier and better food production practices, especially in the animal food industry. And whereas G20 Health Summit spread through 2023, they offer an opportunity for India to ensure that all aspects of AMR they are addressed and countries they commit to progress on this disease. Then moving on to the next important article for us. So India's Sri Lankan refugees, they need fair consideration. So it will soon be 14 years since the end of the civil war in Sri Lanka. And the 3-decade war that ended in May 2009, it devastated the once peaceful and prosperous nation that is Sri Lanka. Many civilians, they perished and large sections, they had no choice but to flee the country, and some within the country, while others, they left for foreign lands, having lost their livelihoods and fearing for their lives. So many sought protection in India also, and among a population of identical ethnicity in Tamil Nadu. So the vast majority traveled in boats and dinghies in a desperation. So they entered India in search of safety, many without travel documents, and they were received and hosted by the government of India on humanitarian grounds. So there is slow progress when it comes to their rights. So the end of the civil war, it renewed hope for this nation wrecked after years of ethnic strife and displacement. Government of Sri Lanka constituted the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission in 2010 to look back at the conflict Sri Lanka suffered, as well as to look ahead of an era of healing and peace building in the country. So a solution that provides relief from enduring refugee status is what is needed. And apart from that, when we talk about refugees in India, so here, from the prelims perspective, it is important for you to know that India is not a signatory to the UN Convention on Refugees. And in India, there are around 58,648 refugees that are residing in 108 camps in Tamil Nadu, while 54 are in Odisha. And another 34,000 refugees registered in Tamil Nadu authorities reside outside the camps. So, however, the objective of the government of India remains repatriation of the refugees to Sri Lanka back. So, we see that no organized repatriation was done thereafter. Like one was done during 1995, but none after that. So amongst them are 30,000 persons of Indian origin, also known as the Hill Tamils. So they have a claim to Sri Lankan citizenship via the Indo-Sri Lankan Agreement of 1964 and the amendments to the Grant of Citizenship to Persons of Indian Origin Act of Sri Lanka. So today, Sri Lankan Tamil refugees in India who wish to return voluntarily, they are being facilitated by the government of Sri Lanka. So that is there. And apart from that, the issue of voluntary return. So Sri Lankan refugees in India, they are in a protracted situation, some for over 4 decades. So at the UNHCR, we perceive voluntary return as the most desired choice to end the refugee status. So there is a significant population which may not wish to return and preferring to call India as their home. So this is a cohort born and educated in India with no knowledge or experience of their country of origin, that is Sri Lanka. So, India possesses the capacity and the legal framework to find durable solutions to the refugee situation in Tamil Nadu. So, in line with the Global Compact on Refugees, India, along with the international community, has significantly contributed to building conditions within Sri Lanka for a safe and durable return. So, the welfare of refugees, including the efforts towards their self reliance, can be cited as a global best practice. So, what remains is a solution for the group, which may consider India to be their home after a stay of decades. So, they, above all, they need a fair consideration here. In this case, as we were specifically talking about the Tamil refugees. So basically, this article is talking about judges and the lure of the political job. So we recently, like, we have been talking about this issue that there must be a cooling off period when a retired judge is appointed as a governor in a state. So again, it raises questions over the independence of judiciary. So, within a month of retiring from the Supreme Court of India, Justice S. Abdul Nazir, he has been appointed as governor of Andhra Pradesh. So, this has been there within a month of his retirement. And like many others, the author says that I believe it is no coincidence that he was a part of the constitution bench that decided the Ayodhya Ram Mandir land issue. So, again, the same thing that it raises questions over the independence, autonomy of the Indian judiciary. So basically, like these appointments, they're all signaling on the part of the government, letting the members of the higher judiciary know that they will be suitably rewarded if they issue favorable decisions in the favor of the government. So herein we can say comes the political element, which kind of influence the judgments. And apart from that, while a governor's position may seem largely ceremonial, but it is in fact a squarely political appointment. And in any event, this appears to be part of the ruling party's strategic mission to destabilize the judiciary, chipping away in small and big ways at various aspects of its functioning. And if you step back and observe, the judiciary is slowly but surely being subtly weakened. So, this is what are the observations of the author of this article, and he has been the former Chief Justice of Delhi High Court and former chairperson of Law Commission of India. So he says that the government's behavior is also hypocritical, for it is deliberately paying no heed to its own manifesto, which was articulated by its late leader Arun Jaitley, that said that such post-retirement judicial appointments should be avoided. So it was clearly mentioned in the party's manifesto, and still they are doing exactly the opposite of it. So, in fact, inducing the judges by such appointments was a specific allegation directed by BJP against the Congress led coalition. But the judiciary is no less culpable in this situation. Ideally, he said, I would like to believe that Indian judges are made of stronger stuff and not ones to be seduced thus. So judges, they must recognize that handouts from the government in the form of such political appointments are not one way, and there is a giver and there is a receiver. So it is like obviously it goes both the ways, and Indian judiciary must distinguish between the political favors and other post-retirement employment opportunities. So there needs to be a demarcation between the roles where the presence of a judicial authority is clearly valuable and even necessary, such as in case of a tribunal or a commission, and where it is not necessary. So ideally, the judicial community should take a concerted decision on this, say in the Chief Justice's conference on this issue, and the plenary should agree that judges should not take up any appointments upon retiring or upon retirement stemming from the political patronage. Additionally, a cooling period of about 2 years should be considered a mandatory minimum before a judge agrees to take on any post-retirement adjudicatory role, if in any case that is to be there. So that's how it should be there. And let's move forward. So defense ministry is to spend the most on domestic industries, so focusing more upon Atmanirbhar Bharat and developing our own indigenous technologies and aircrafts. So appeal from United Nations to aid the earthquake survivors of Syria, and India has already been supporting them. So taxing the windfall profits of the oil companies. So here, what are windfall taxes? How are they calculated? What does the government do with the revenue which is accrued from these taxes? And what are why are the profits of the oil and gas companies rising? So what role does Russia-Ukraine war have in this? And what has the chairman of the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs said over this issue? So this table is basically showing the details of recent revisions made in the special additional excise duty on the domestic crude oil production. So you can see that it has been increasing. And apart from that, so let's start with this article. So why tax windfall profits? So windfall profits, they refer to an unanticipated spike in the earnings of an entity resulting from an exogenous event, on which could be one-off or it could be a prolonged in nature also, and not resulting from a business decision. So it is like because of a one sudden event that we see that oil companies might be earning huge amounts of profits. So that profit is basically taxed under this windfall tax. And so the central idea here is for the sovereigns to capitalize on the lofty profits which are made by the entities and use it for specific domestic pursuits. For example, it could be spur the collections to guard against the consequences of a larger geopolitical event, or redistribute them for it to be used for the domestic social service schemes. And as per the government, the collection of the special additional excise duties for the ongoing financial year is estimated to be around rupees 25,000 crores from the production of the crude oil, export of the petrol, diesel, and the aviation turbine fuel. So what led to the windfall gain? So Russia's actions in Ukraine, they were central to the volatility that was observed in the oil market in the previous calendar year. Obviously, we saw that there was huge volatility in the crude oil prices because of the Russia-Ukraine war. And for perspective, let's see that Russia was among the major players in the global oil market and among the largest producers alongside the Saudi Arabia and US. So as a response to Russia's actions, several Western countries, they have imposed sanctions over it. They have imposed a price cap on the Russian crude oil, and they moved to stop or curtail their energy imports from Russia. So basically, in order to impact the profits being made by Russia through its oil business. So this led to sharp increase in the fossil fuel prices as the sovereigns, they went to look for other supplies for its energy needs. So we saw that at that point of time, there was huge increase in the crude oil prices. And in India, ONGC's profit after tax Until September end, in the ongoing financial year, it stood at rupees 28,000 crores compared to rupees 40,000 crores in the complete fiscal ending March 31st, 2022. So the turn of events, it has led to the oil companies prioritizing the investments in the conventional sources to provide for energy security than transitioning towards cleaner energy to meet the energy requirements. So obviously, because of the Russia-Ukraine war, the main priority or the first priority is to ensure there is energy security instead of focusing more upon investments in the energy transition towards the green energy sector. And apart from that, what potentially lies ahead now? So nearly a year since we saw that there's been almost 1 year to the Russia-Ukraine war. So the International Energy Agency notes that the global oil markets, they are trading in relative calm as of now. So as of now, there is not, we can say, a major concern or major factor that is, we can say, kind of the risky situation. So right now we have some kind of stability in the crude oil market, and oil prices, they are back to their pre-war levels. Exception being the diesel, though it has also drifted much lower than last summer's history's high. So world oil supply, it looks set to exceed the demand through the first half of 2023. So we can expect that in the coming times, the oil prices are not going to shoot up much. And apart from that, the G7 price cap on the crude, it appears to be helping to keep the barrels flowing. So this is basically price cap that was imposed by the Western world over Russia, and International Energy Agency estimates that the global oil demand is set to rise by 2 MB per day in 2023. And the Asia Pacific region, fueled by China, which resumed the economic activities following a prolonged period of lockdowns, that also dominates the outlook. So the supply side has been largely steady in January also. So understanding India's Mental Health Care Act 2017. So here, the National Human Rights Commission, in a report, it flagged the inhuman and deplorable condition of all 46 government-run medical healthcare institutions across the country. And these observations were made after a visit to all operational government facilities to assess the implementation of the Mental Health Care Act 2017. And this act, it is centered on the agency of individuals acknowledged their right to live as part of the community under Section 19 and focused on the rehabilitation of them. So poor budgetary allocations this year and the utilization of funds creates a scenario where the shelter homes, they remain under-equipped and establishments are understaffed. So these are the challenges when it comes to implementation, when even in terms of the financial resources and the current state also of such government-run mental health care institutions. So this act is being like not implemented in an effective manner, and hence we are not seeing any results also. So here it's important for us to know like what is hail. So hail is the high altitude long endurance RPS. It will be supported by the HAL engine division. So basically here Hindustan Aeronautics Limited is going to provide maintenance and overhaul support for the MQ-9B drone engines in India. And so people of Ladakh, they're protesting for statehood for the Union Territory of Ladakh, and they're also demanding for their inclusion under the sixth schedule of the Constitution. Apart from that, they are asking for reservation for the local people. So, And also they are asking for the Lok Sabha seats also. So these are their demands, and basically like they've been protesting against this since Ladakh was declared as a union territory after the revocation of Article 370 in 2019. So Chief Justice of India says that governors should not enter the political arena, but we often say that it's a political post, and obviously a governor who is like coming from majorly is being appointed by the central government. So whenever like a governor who is appointed in a state which is not ruled by the central government is not in good terms with the government of that particular state, and we see that this leads to issues when it comes to governance. So talking about the UN reforms, so India and Bangladesh, they are going to back each other for the UNSC membership. And apart from the multilateral engagements, the two sides they held discussions on the bilateral development projects, their defense cooperation and security issues during the official visit of their foreign secretary to Dhaka. So we also met the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and conveyed Prime Minister Modi's message of continued commitment to the bilateral relationship, upholding Bangladesh as the pivot of India's neighborhood first policy and a key partner of its Act East policy. So Israel group is running fake camps in India and even in other nations. So this has been like, so China must take a haircut on its loans to poor countries, says India's G20 Sherpa. So Beijing needs to come out openly and say what their debt is and how to settle it, says Amitabh Kant, and in a rare and direct reference to Chinese debt of developing nations. So while the US has been a vocal critique of Chinese debt, India has seldom commented on it while talking on sovereign debt. And when we talk about Sri Lanka's case, obviously we know about China's debt policy that it lends so much, such a huge amount that after a point of time, the country or the borrower country is not able to repay that debt. And here comes basically China's autonomy in terms of decisions for that particular country. So, as per a study, warm water is melting Antarctica's glaciers. And we also saw yesterday about the rising sea levels. And so that is going to impose major risk in the coming times. So government monitoring imports to detect any surge that can hurt the economy. So we are monitoring the imports that we are doing so that there is not a huge increase in our imports, because obviously huge if we are depending more, and obviously it would be impacting our forex reserves also. So that is being monitored, and Atmanirbhar Bharat approach is not inward looking. So imports of critical inputs, they are not barred. And also, a finance minister urges the exporters to be mindful of the global demand slowdown in order to guard against getting demotivated. So, so government continues paying duties wherever it can be done without hurting the local firms. So a surge in imports for only 3 months can hurt the economy for a whole year. and exporters urged to constantly interact with the government to help tide over the challenges because of slowdown in the global demand. So cereal inflation broad-based and it is worrying as of now, specifically when we talk about the inflation in wheat prices. So the inflation in cereals category hit 16% in January compared to 13% in December. And alongside cereals, rising prices of protein items like milk, eggs, and meat pushed up the food and beverages inflation to 6.2% in January. So higher inflation in more heavily weighted components such as staple cereals and proteins was worrying. And the 3 month moving average inflation rates for items like biscuits, bread, and all of these have been substantially higher than their latest 3 year average inflation rates. So cereal inflation in short has become broad based, which is a concerning thing for us. So we saw that the wheat prices they fell to rupees 5 per kg after the open market sale done by the government. Basically, the buffer stock, some amount of it was released in the market so that there is increase in the supply of wheat, which would be helping in reducing the prices because obviously there's a situation of kind of lesser supply of wheat in the market. Now we'll move on to the next newspaper. That is going to be the Indian Express. So Tripura is going to vote today, and so big infrastructure push for the villages on the border and 7 new ITPP battalions were already taken up this thing. So government decision to approve a financial package for the border villages and upgrade the security comes at a time when issues with China there are still to be resolved along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. And PLA troops they are still squatting in the Depsang plains and Demchuk. So you need to locate these two things on map. And China is also upgrading its infrastructure along the LAC, and even India is doing that. So look into the death of rare animals, appoint the staff at zoo. This is what comes from the High Court to the officials. And so the Delhi High Court asked the National Zoological Park and the central government authorities to cure the deficiencies pointed out by a litigant regarding the death of various animals in zoo and appointment of staff in the park for this. So we are celebrating the Adi Mahotsav, and where we'll be celebrating tribal entrepreneurship, crafts, their culture, their cuisine, and the commerce. So this is a path-breaking connect for the tribal entrepreneurs from the local to global. And there will be exhibition come sale of the handloom and the handicrafts, various types of Sri Anna, which is millets and other forest produce would be there. Cultural programs showcasing the rich tribal diversity and vibrancy in their cuisines from different parts of the country. And here we can also have a look at them in the form of the picture. So it would be basically held at the Major Dhyan Chand National Stadium in New Delhi and would be inaugurated by our Prime Minister. So, firstly, here it is important to find out more about the primary agricultural credit societies and center to set up 2 lakh credit units and cooperatives in 5 years. So the move is significant as there are still 1.6 lakh panchayats without PACS and nearly 2 lakh panchayats without any dairy cooperative society. And according to the cooperative cooperation ministry, at present there are around 99,000 primary agricultural credit societies. So these are the numbers. So, like different programs has been mentioned. So these become important, which is National Program for Dairy Development. And we have the Dairy Processing and Infrastructure Development Fund, which is there under the Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairying. We have Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana for the fisheries and the Fisheries and Aquaculture Infrastructure Fund under the Department of Fisheries. So the new tradition of stalling the house, it is not good for democracy. This comes from the Speaker of Lok Sabha. And this is basically the new tradition is of indulging in allegations and counter allegations instead of constructive criticism and creating stalemate in the house in a planned manner. And this is not appropriate for the parliamentary democracy. So that is there, and obviously if there will be disruption, so how is the house going to function? And this obviously would raise then questions over the functioning of the democracy in India. So we are expecting the drought-like conditions to be there in Maharashtra, and 2022 was the sixth warmest year in Kerala's history since 1901. So obviously these are the impacts of climate change that we are seeing. And so there are chances of El Nino event in the Pacific Ocean. So El Nino is not a favorable condition, and this leads to deficit monsoon also. So this is a concern. And apart from that, from the like past 3 years, we've been having continuously La Nina events. So here you can find out how does El Nino and La Nina works. So this is there in the geography. So you can Google and find out more about it. And if we have something more to discuss from this is, so as of now, the surface waters, they are colder than the normal. And right now we are having conditions of La Nina. And in fact, the state has been continuing for almost 3 years now. And as I told you that we have been having La Nina continuously for the last 3 years. This is one of the longest persisting La Nina event. But La Nina conditions, they are weakening now, and neutral conditions are likely to prevail for the next few months. And here, what becomes important is the Center for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So this is there of United States, so not that important for us. So neutral conditions in the Pacific, they are no indicator of the amount of rainfall that is expected over India during the monsoon season. And in any case, it is too early to predict the monsoon rainfall right now. So Maharashtra has witnessed excess rains in the last 2 years, and leading to a record sugarcane production in the large parts of the state. So much so that demands were made to extend the crushing season of sugar mills to ensure all sugarcane was crushed. So that huge was the supply this time. So El Nino is basically the unusual warming of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. It does tend to suppress rainfall over the Indian subcontinent during the monsoon season, but it is not a one-to-one correlation, we can say. And in any case, the development of El Nino itself is not yet certain as of now. So, given that our civil aviation sector is performing nicely and the demand is also increasing, the air traffic is increasing. So, Air India has placed order for more aircraft. So, this shows that definitely the civil aviation sector is going to increase. So we'll be talking about like recently there was an action against the BBC. So what is an IT survey and how it differs from a search? So we'll be understanding that. So what is an IT survey? So as per the section 133A of the IT Act of 1961, it gives the IT department the power to carry out surveys to collect hidden information, and this section also allows it allows an authorized officer to enter any place of business or profession or charitable activity within their assigned area to verify the books of account or other documents, cash, stock, or other valuable articles or things which may be useful for or relevant to any proceeding against the act. So it may also impound and retain any books of account or other documents after recording reasons for doing so. And what is an IT search? So a search is often called a raid, and although the word raid is not being defined in this act, however, search has been defined under section 132 of the act. So search is kind of a raid that is conducted. So, what is the difference? So, broadly speaking, a search is a more serious proceeding than a survey with larger consequences. So, search can take place anywhere within the jurisdiction of the authorized officer. A survey can only be conducted within the limits of the areas assigned to that officer at which a business or profession is carried on. So surveys can be carried out only during the working hours on the business days, and searches they can happen on any day after sunrise and continue until the procedures are completed. So no fixed time period for carrying out searches. So the scope of a survey is limited to the inspection of the books and the verification of cash and inventory. And in case of search, the entire premises can be inspected to unravel undisclosed assets with the help of the police. So inflation continues to hurt, and RBI must reveal its remedial measures to keep expectations under check. So because of, we can say, the expectations of inflation, we are seeing that it is now again started to increase. As we yesterday talked about increase in retail inflation in the month of January, but we saw that wholesale price index has declined. So inflation is proving to be the Archie's heel of Archie's heel of the Indian economy's recovery from the pandemic and subsequent global disruption. So, after softening for the 3 consecutive months, it again started to spike in January, and RBI has been playing the part of an inflation targeting central bank over the last few months, raising the interest rates in an attempt to rein in the inflation. So, right now, the repo rate is also at a higher amount, 6.5%. However, the fight to bring down inflation is clearly far from over because we are not seeing that inflation expectations are cooling down anytime soon. And the RBI had to submit a report to the government describing a plan of action that would help bring the inflation down. The law does not require either the RBI or the government to disclose the contents of this report. However, given that inflation is proving to be difficult to rein in and that the 4% target is not likely to be achieved next year either, realizing the report to especially highlight the remedial actions that the RBI plans to undertake might help stabilize the inflation expectations and facilitate the central bank's own endeavor to fight the inflation. So the risk to inflation have continued unabated over the last few months and have contributed to the latest spike in inflation as well. So first, with food accounting for 46% of overall CPI basket, a rise in food inflation from roughly 4% in December to almost 6% in January 2023. It has played an important role in the overall inflation going up, and we are having an increase in cereal inflation also. Then secondly, the core, or basically which does not include the food inflation and the fuel inflation. So the core inflation in January came out to be at 6.2%. So we are having the problem of sticky core inflation in India, which is not fluctuating or which is not coming down so easily. Finally, we have the external factors. They also have a role in case of inflation. Inflation in developed countries, it continues to be high, and India is importing some of this elevated inflation through the international trade in goods and services, which is also called as imported inflation. So a credible glide path to bring inflation down to the target levels is of critical importance, particularly now with the national elections which are around the corner. So we need to have a proper plan and what steps would be taken in future so as to ensure that inflation comes down. So India's civil aviation policy is bearing fruit and it will empower the citizens also. So today, India is the third largest domestic civil aviation market in the world after China and US. And our domestic passengers, they have more than doubled from 60 million in 2014 to 143 million in 2022. So there has also been a significant increase in the international air passengers. Flying is no longer looked upon as an elitist luxury, but it is a necessary service. And India's civil aviation sector has not only democratized air travel by adding crores of first-time flyers, but it has also provided employment opportunities for engineers, trained technicians, and airline service staff. So they have been trying to attract India's middle class into becoming the commercial air travelers by offering no-frills, cost-effective services to them. And central to this is the strategy was to make the flight operations to even Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities commercially viable. So we have the regional connectivity scheme, and we also have UDAN, that is the Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagarik, and that has expedited the connectivity to the non-metros also. So today we have approximately 475 UDAN routes involving 73 airports. And apart from that, so right now Indian flight operators, they have a fleet size of approximately 750 aircrafts. So obviously, as the size of the fleet will grow, so the employment opportunities are also going to increase and diversify given in the civil aviation sector. And so we would be requiring more of flight training organizations also. Right now, India has only 35 approved FTOs with 53 bases, and additional 10 are on the annual. So the government also announced the production-linked incentive scheme for the drones with an outlay of 120 crores over the 3 years. And another area where civil aviation policy has contributed is in the area of agriculture, whereas Krishi Udan scheme is focused on transporting the perishable food products of the farmers from the hilly areas and northeastern states and the tribal areas in order to boost their incomes and also boosting the agricultural exports. So India's Civil Aviation Ministry has also been instrumental in rescuing the Indians and the foreign nationals during emergencies. And as a part of the Vande Bharat mission, India operated air bubbles to facilitate the travel of 1.83 crore passengers during the COVID-19 waves. Apart from that, Operation Ganga, where Indian students from Ukraine at the peak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, they were rescued. So there has to be synergy between tourism and civil aviation in propagating India's tourism potential. That is obviously well-known thing. Apart from that, so Prime Minister said that he further stated that the tourism in all its forms, whether for the faith or leisure, needs modern infrastructure and airways are one of the most crucial components of that. So taking this into account, the Ministry of Tourism also funds more than 50 routes and has approved another 10 routes under the Udan scheme. And as we enter the Amrit Kal, so Indian aviation is flying high. So Beijing is now offering support to Iran as it is facing sanctions from the West. So basically, China, in a way, is trying to leverage this opportunity by increasing its presence in the region. And we also know about China's balls of theory in the Indian Ocean. So the Syrian refugees which were there in Turkey, they rushed to border crossing to return back to their homes. And here, so thousands of Syrian refugees which were there in Turkey, they've lined up at the borders and they're in hopes of returning home temporarily after the Syrian border officials announced that Turkey had agreed to let them go and then return later while it copes with a disastrous earthquake. So the name of the crossing is Bab al Hawa, and it is administered by a Syrian opposition group that controls part of the country's northwest also. So Russia declares gains in eastern Ukraine as Ukraine it seeks faster military help. So Russia is on the offensive and aggressively increasing its actions in Ukraine. So North Korea's food shortage is getting worse, and North Korean food prices appears to have deteriorated, South Korea says, and North Korea has cut the rations to its soldiers for the first time in more than 2 decades. North Korea has effectively acknowledged serious food shortages. So the exports they have dropped by 6.6% in January for the second month, and government aims to double the seafood exports by 2025. The center is aiming to nearly doubling the seafood exports to $14 billion, and the seafood exports they are showing positive trend this fiscal with 3% growth in volume. So reflecting the slump in global trade and a moderation in the domestic investment and consumption demands, India's merchandise exports and imports they have shrank, and basically, while both the outward and the inward shipments they shrank for the second straight month, exports contractions was also third in the 4 months. So our exports are declining, and the current account deficit for the first half of 2022-23 it stood at 3.3% of the GDP, but it is expected to moderate in the second half. The global software and the IT services spending would remain strong in 2023, and the CAD would remain eminently manageable and within the parameters of viability. And decline in imports during January was mainly because of the slowing of imports of gold, electronic goods, pearls, and precious and semi-precious stones, silver, and organic and inorganic chemicals. So, what is MCLR? Basically, the marginal cost based lending rate, and it is the minimum interest rates below which the banks cannot lend. And banks calculate the operating cost as a percentage of the marginal cost of the funds for computing the MCLR. And this has been increased by up to 25 basis points, that is by 0.25 percentage by several banks, which includes SBI, Union Bank, and Bank of Baroda, because the repo rate has been increased by RBI. So because of that, the MCLR has been increased. So here in Financial Express, we'll be taking up, we've already seen that our exports, they have slowed down by 6.6%, and imports have also contracted, which reflect slowing domestic demand also. So here in this graph, this data has been presented. You can see the blue one is for the imports, so they have been declining. Our exports is the red line. So even they are like, our exports are below the imports. So this shows that we have a deficit, current account deficit. So this is the first time that India is getting an opportunity to shape the agenda for the world instead of responding to the agenda which was earlier used to be set by other countries. And we can build a global community which can provide better sustainable development. So Center is open to inclusion of the petro products under the GST. Right now, they are not covered under the GST, and there is no inward-looking policy. Atmanirbhar Bharat is not an inward-looking policy. It is basically improving our efficiency, improving our self-sufficiency, and later on, obviously, those products can be used in exporting. So that is not in any way an inward-looking policy. And she says that it will cut the import duties without hurting the domestic industry. So basically, there is we can say a pending reform when it comes to GST. So this is one of them, and another one is the rationalization of the GST rates. So there's been no growth for 72% of the MSMEs in the last 5 years. And 76% of the MSMEs, they say that they're not making a profit. Only 21% of the respondents believe that the government of India has supported them adequately during the COVID-19 pandemic, and 87% of them feel that the union budget was disappointing or it is a big letdown and it had no comments. So basically, there were like not much support coming for the MSME sector in the union budget. And we have been seeing that obviously COVID-19 has majorly impacted them. Even GST implementation also impacted the MSME sector. So a tax cut on fuels and other items is likely. And there are inflation concerns. So food inflation is likely to stay high. Prices of milk, maize, and soya oil, they have been adding to the woes, and import duty cuts likely on items like maize, which attract 60% basic duty. Then January's retail inflation was above RBI's tolerance band of 6% for the first time since October 2022. And a cut in the fuel taxes could push the oil companies to pass on the benefits to the retail consumers. So government is basically thinking about going ahead with this step because inflation has been again started to increase, which was we were expecting that it has now started to moderate. But again, when we look at the figures for the month of January, so again, we are getting more concerned at the inflation front. So again, there are going to be few agenda that were again not taken up during the last GST council meet. So One is regarding the appellate tribunals and a few rate revisions, basically the rationalization of the GST rates. So the council may cut the GST rate from 18% to nil for the millet-based items, because we are obviously promoting the millets production and consumption this year, and it may consider a report uh, to plug the revenue leakages in the pan masala sector also. So let's see how things will be going ahead during this GST council meet. So G20 is there for the greater climate finance support for the farmers and incentive for the green farming. Delegates at G20 first agriculture dispute deputies meeting, they suggested the farmers can be financially incentivized if they adopt climate friendly farming. And the meeting also discussed the impact of the climate change on agriculture and its productivity. So the carbon farming program in the country has been initiated by a private entity, which is Grow Indigo, which is a joint venture between seed major Mayuka and US-based Indigo. So farmers who adopt farming techniques, direct seeded rice, which improves the water use efficiency and no tillage practice, which conserves the soil organic biomass prior to planting of the paddy, could register for the program for getting the carbon credit also. So basically, financially incentivizing the farmers so that they adopt more of green farming practices is the thing here. And so we have India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture, which will lay down a framework for the agri stack. There was a discussion on achieving one of the sustainable development goals of zero hunger by 2030 also. So one of the issues regarding obviously food security, given the rate of increase in population, and obviously India is also going to be the world's most populous country this year, surpassing China. So we have that concern also, and that is there. So apart from that, so UN Secretary General Anthony Guterres says that we must be more vigilant than ever, and terrorist and the violent extremist groups are finding fertile ground on the internet to spew their vicious venom. So this is basically a kind of a emergence of internet terrorism that he's talking about. So here we're talking about adoption of electric vehicles. So this article is saying that it is not the right way to drive the EV adoption. The EV mandates of the Delhi's motor vehicles aggregator scheme, it poses a significant challenge to the employment and the livelihoods. And aggregators will be forced to pass on the mandates to the service partners for the compliance, which would be increasing the cost for the later, who are mostly from the economically vulnerable section. So basically, this would be like shifting of the cost to these people, and they would have to bear the burden of this. So let's see if anything else is missing over here. And the when we talk about the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, that is still in nascent stages in Delhi, with limited financing despite the central and the state subsidies that has been provided, so that more and more people they shift towards the electric vehicles. So the policy proposed by Delhi, it aims to ensure that the vehicles used by the aggregators and the delivery service providers, they are brought into the fold of the sustainable and clean mobility, but there needs to be a pragmatic approach to balance the livelihoods, economics, and the environment altogether. And the gig economy is largely freelance and task based, providing flexibility to its partners. So, state level regulation to get a license to operate might curb the essence of the gig economy, and the flexibility of the gig workers, leading to a domino effect across the states. So green technology can be a business imperative today also. So managing the green line across the entire value chain will be crucial to enterprise success. So basically, this can be one of the ideas for your startups, how you can use a green technology in a business mode. So the brokers, they stop offering margin trading on the select Adani stocks. So still right now the issue is like hot as of now. And we have to see that what Supreme Court is going to say on this whole issue. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining in, Sarkari. I hope you've all, understood all the intricacies that we've discussed today. You'll be getting the PDF link in the description box, so do not miss that. And do not forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us today.